So you may have heard of the term think for yourself, but realistically, how much do we think for ourselves? Well, first question then would be exactly, how do we know what's right and how do we know what's wrong? Well, maybe we can turn to what we know is always right, science. And just kidding, science isn't actually always right. In fact, it's a lot more wrong than you think. And there are plenty of examples of this, and I'm going to be going through a couple of them. Science is very, very flawed, and it doesn't matter who is talking about any topic. It doesn't matter if it's a medical professional. It doesn't matter if it's a physicist. It doesn't matter what your degree is. Authority is not the dictating fact in who knows more than the other. That's just not how it works. And science is a great example of some very, very problematic things relating to ego, relating to money, religion. There's plenty of things I'm going to be talking about in this video. So to start off, science itself is not infallible, and people do have biases, especially when conducting experiments of their own. And maybe, as you can guess, scientists, just like everybody else, they are people. And people, well, guess what? They need money. And sometimes scientists think they're not getting all the money that they deserve. Sometimes scientists might think they're not getting all the recognition they deserve. Sometimes they might be thinking anything. It doesn't really matter what it is. The whole point is scientists, just like people, sometimes do have biases, and 99.999% of the cases, they do have biases. And false research might be published just to make a news headline. This has been done plenty of times. There's been some even worse examples, and I'll be giving you a couple of them. But before we get to a couple of them, they also might be working for companies, and that's an interest group. And that's where interest groups can come into play, and interest groups can affect the scientists' research in some way. So what the scientist is researching isn't necessarily always right or always necessarily accurate, because the research may be more favored for a particular interest group. And this is incredibly common. I mean, it can get pretty bad sometimes. It can get so bad to the point where it's messing with the field of quantum physics, which is a very hard science. It can mess with cancer research, which is also supposed to be a hard science. Many of these are supposed to be hard sciences, but if you p-hack correctly, or if you forge your data good enough, then you can get away with it. And great video by Veritasium explains a lot of this in way more detail. So there's going to be a link to that video. But besides all that, I'm just going to give you a couple names of some very authoritative people who had high positions in academia, originally anyways, before some people, students in some cases, ended up figuring out, this person actually forged their data. This isn't right. So a quick reason why you don't blindly follow authority, or in this case, you could even say blindly follow science. Just a couple names to throw out there, and you can look them up if you're interested. Diedrich Stapel is one of them. Francesca Gino is another. Khalid Shah is another in the medical area. Mark Tessier-Levine, I'm pretty sure that was related to neuroscience if I remember correctly. And lastly, another one, Greg Semenza, a Nobel Prize winner. Yes, that's right, a Nobel Prize winner. There are plenty of examples of forged data and plenty examples of falsified results. I mean, there's way more than this. It's way worse. I'm not going to go into all of the names, but those are just a couple if you want to look up. And what you have to realize, even science, even though it's our best way of knowing, as humans, it is the most reliable, it is still incredibly valuable. And there are some very, very suspicious interest groups at play. And SDA is one of them, but I'm just going to keep it at that. Not going to go too much farther. And with the names I mentioned earlier, some of them are in the hardcore sciences, like maybe in the medical area, like biology, and some of them are in the not as hardcore sciences, like behavioral sciences. It doesn't really matter. Data and science, especially as of recently, very especially as of recently, it's it's gotten pretty bad, and I mean the manipulation has been rampant. It's been rampant manipulation and abuse of the data and just science in general, whether it be like plagiarism or p-hacking. I mean, it's really common, and it's really bad. But speaking of money related, there are interest groups that could be at play, and some interest groups, it might be money related, it might be power related, it might even be religion, it might be something completely different. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is they're another interest group, and they affect the scientists' research in some way. And because of that, it makes it almost really difficult to trust anything, especially in today's day and age, where even though it is the internet as we have it, I mean, it's really truly a marvelous invention. With the age of information comes the age of disinformation, and there is plenty, right, rampant disinformation. It can sometimes get pretty bad. The main point, though, I'm trying to get at is that you have to be willing to do two things specifically that are very difficult, and it's so difficult that it made everything that I did stressful for years on end, and even maybe today it's sometimes quite stressful, but in the end it pays off. It pays off so much. It pays off financially, it pays off for my health when it comes to diet and exercise, both of them, brain function. I mean, it pays off in everything. But the one problem about it is that it never ever ends, and it never will end. It's literally a lifestyle, or maybe you can call it a philosophy in that case. The first thing out of the two things is to know that learning is an endless journey, and it will never, and I mean never, come to an end. It should never come to an end if you're doing it correctly. As the saying goes, the greatest master is an eternal student. And realizing that you have to be open to new suggestions, as ridiculous as they might sound at first, it could be something like how calories don't actually matter, which you might think is true, but there is definitely evidence against that. Overwhelming evidence against that, actually. You have to question everything, and you have to realize that maybe the idea that somebody else says, it might even be in politics, it doesn't really matter what it is, the idea that somebody else says at first, even if it might sound ridiculous, you can't cling to your opinions, and that's because opinions should be viewed in a certain way if you want to continually learn. So this is why. This one particularly is easy if you view opinions as like objects in a box, and you don't attach your opinions to your identity. If you keep the ones that work and you discard the ones that don't work, then you'll be fine. And thank you, CGP Grey, for making this analogy. It was amazing. Very long video, very long time ago, but still great video. But if you cling to your opinions as if they were part of your identity, which I don't think they should be, then you will refuse to change regardless of the information or the evidence presented in front of you, or evidence presented to the contrary specifically. So basically, if you want to be right, you have to always be willing to change your mind. Now, the second one out of the two is a little bit harder, and in my opinion anyways, actually it's much harder, and the reason is because you have to bring out the younger version of yourself. Well, specifically when you were 3 or 4 years old, you probably asked a question that annoyed your parents to death. And 99% of the time, they probably tried to throw you away, or be like, hey, quit it, stop, shut up, stop saying that, stop asking. And that question is why. Always ask the question why. Ask the question why because it is one of the most important questions. So maybe, why do I eat this? Or why do I brush my teeth? Why do I take a shower? Why do I go outside to run, if I run? Why do I go to school? Why do I go to the bar? Or why do I go hang out with my friends? It doesn't matter. just ask the question why and keep asking it, because it will give you the answers to many, many things you may have thought are useful or necessary, or that you need to do for some reason. And if you do ask why enough, then you'll realize that most of the questions I said before as to why do I do this, why do I do that, like shower, brushing teeth, going to the bar, going with friends, if you keep asking those questions, why, over and over and over again, and you really narrow down why exactly you do some of these things, then you'll start to realize that you don't actually need to do a lot of those things. 80 to 90% of them, actually, maybe even 100% of them. And I am a great living example of that. So next time, before you do anything at all, doesn't matter, every once in a while, ask yourself, why? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? And maybe, if you ask it enough and you get a little inspired, you might actually do some research and try to figure something out and go, oh, why do I do this? Why do I do that? Well, what's in this or what's in that? Why do I want to eat this? Why do I want to eat that? Doesn't matter. And if you keep going, you'll eventually realize that after enough time, maybe you're doing it all wrong. Or maybe you never even needed to do it in the first place. And that's most cases, especially with me. I ended up learning so many things I've done wrong my entire life when it came to diet, when it came to exercise, when it came to even studying. It doesn't really matter what it is. I've done so many of them so wrong my entire life, and I never knew why exactly. I didn't ask this question earlier, the question of why, but hey, I guess you gotta always start somewhere, even if it's a little bit older and you weren't taught that. So, hope you learned something. Hopefully I inspired you. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Why though?